All right, buckle up. This car has a spoiler. I'm sitting in my garage right now because I didn't go to the theater. I just finished watching Dragon Quest: Your Story on Netflix. Wow. So that ending. There's almost like two movies going on here. One that has its own story, and I have my own feelings about it, and then the rug gets yanked out from under you, and there's this kind of second movie that's just the last, 5-10 minutes, that goes nuts. But let me talk about the first movie, the main story first, and just kind of like some spoilery moments there. I liked the family elements, the kind of like generational elements of this, and I'll mention that probably in my review. But the fact that the hero, Luca, really was meant to be with Bianca was really sweet. That's when the movie really started getting me, when it really started kind of connecting with me. Despite all the things that did not work for me and, I knew would not. But that's when it kind of got a sweetness to it. I actually was moved a little bit in that moment, and it was a neat little surprise that the princess had disguised herself as the old woman witch to give him that potion. That made me feel good about her, because she was getting essentially left at the altar, So it was nice that she did that. It kind of gave some nice closure to that, brief little kind of subplot, and then things went on, and I kind of, there weren't many surprises in the main story for me. I could kind of see them coming a little bit in advance, like the fact that his true feelings were for Bianca. I kind of sensed that before they started making a thing of it, and then that his son Alis was actually going to be the actual hero was not like a surprise to me. When the sword was jiggling on the wall, I was like, well, that's probably because Alis is the chosen one, But yeah, it's still some nice moments between father and son there that as a dad I kind of connected with. You want to see your kids surpass you and do greater things than you, and you just want the world for them, and so that was gratifying, as a dad. Just some interesting stuff about, let me get into the ending. So the ending right at the climax, as they stop the gate from the other evil dimension being opened, Alis is flying back down, having thrown the Mega Master Awesome Sword into the gate to stop the evil forever, and he's coming down. They're like, we did it! We saved the world! And then everything freezes, and you find out that the whole thing we've been watching is a simulation that a person from our world, maybe like a slightly future version of our world, has been playing as like a virtual reality experience. And there's this kind of virus that shows up that was put into the simulation just to screw with people who are fans of Dragon Quest that would play this simulation, to just ruin their experience, basically, to tell them to grow up and get a life, to grow up loser, was basically what they said. And it's important to understand that in Japan, this franchise is a phenomenon. I mean, I don't know if this is one of the games. I know there's been a story or two from Japan of people actually dying because they just wouldn't stop playing a game, and they just, didn't have proper ventilation in their rooms, or they were just, neglected things that they shouldn't have neglected. I don't know if one of those stories is attached to this game, but I do know that people would take very commonly, not show up for work, or I think there might even be some urban legend, I'm not sure if it's true or not, that actually they would release these games only on weekend days because they knew that it would just totally disrupt the workflow in Japan to release it, on a work day. Or maybe they would give the day off to employees or something. I don't know. It was major, and it has been for years. And so the story of this game is loosely based on Dragon Quest V, which I suppose was maybe a really big one in Japan, bigger than the others. I don't know. But it's such a huge deal, and it's a generational thing too. People pass on their love of Dragon Quest to their kids, so it's so much bigger. It's hard to, I think, overstate how big this franchise is in Japan. And so this movie was really made, I think, for those hardcore fans who, the virus, who is the ultimate villain in this story, mocks them for just being immersed in nostalgia and giving themselves over to nostalgia and stuff. And so we are meant, as the viewer, to empathize with the person who loves Dragon Quest and who loves the nostalgia of it and coming back to it. And the main character is talking about, the adventures that they had in Dragon Quest were real for them. Even though the virus as a villain is saying it was all fake, it's a hollow simulation, he's saying these were real to me, these were real people to me, and there's a sadness to that for me, because I think that there is a sanctified way to embrace some of those feelings. And just to clarify, by sanctified I mean set apart for the purposes of God. Like what harmful or unhealthy elements could be stripped away, and what better understanding could be brought to those feelings so that they could be something that is God honoring, so that nostalgia can be God honoring, And maybe I'll talk about this some in my review. There's certainly a major springboard to talk about it. But anyway, what I wanted to say to someone that feels that way is that, these people, they're not real. These experiences you had, they're not real in the same way that real life is real. These adventures that you experienced are not real in the same way that real life is real, but your emotions that you experience while playing them are legitimate, because this game and these experiences are affecting you. They're connecting with you because of a longing that's in our hearts that we cannot fulfill in our day-to-day lives because the world is broken, and we need this whole world and us to be redeemed, to be restored and beyond, to be made into what God truly has wanted for us from the very beginning, but that we cannot experience in this world because sin is rampant and it has broken this world, including our sin that we add to the mix. And so, I want to both validate what this movie is kind of saying and wanting me to think and feel and embrace at the end, and at the same time make modifications to it because it doesn't quite capture truth, but it's really close, And so anyway, I liked the ending, in part because I am the type that likes subversive things, that kind of subvert expectations, and that certainly did. I knew going in there was something about the ending that bothered people. In fact, while I was watching the movie, I opened up Wikipedia and I looked at what the ending was, and I was like, oh, what's this? It said it has a something like ending that Japanese fans didn't like, and the something word was a Japanese word. I had to look that up. It's part of a genre of fiction in manga and other Japanese types of storytelling that involves basically a person from the real world entering into a fantasy world. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't need to know more than that. That even spoils it just a little bit for me, but it did make me more intrigued and helped me push through a lot of the stuff that I really disliked about the movie. So yeah, there was some touching things about it. I do have a little bit of nostalgia for Dragon Quest. I'm not the person that this movie is geared toward, but there was some sweetness to it, and it did tug at my heartstrings because of what it was. I think trying to get at, and it made me feel for the people in Japan who, I think about, man, what's the nature of their lives that a video game is what captures their sense of wonder and captures their sense of fulfillment and connects with this longing. I mean, the fact that this game means so much, there's a sadness to me in that, as I think about those in Japan, and I wonder what are their lives like. Some of the things, there are some moments that in this movie that speak to, I think, feeling trapped by the expectations of your culture and by tradition. I noticed in the moments where long before the spoiler, where the character says, when the witch visits him and says, you need a potion to unlock what your true feelings are. And he's like, I always follow my heart. Like, that's a good thing. That's what everyone should do, and that's what I do. And of course, you may know, if you've listened to my content for a while, I hate that phrase, follow your heart. And I still think it's terrible, terrible advice. But as I was watching the movie this time, I was thinking about the culture that this movie is made in, and why that might be a phrase that is appealing to people in that culture. America is a culture where we've always just kind of followed our hearts, and and so any encouragement to do that, I'm like, we do not need any further encouragement to follow our hearts, But I thought about culture in Japan, and it is much more steeped in tradition and the expectations that the culture has of you to behave a certain way, to achieve certain things. And so I can imagine that there would be a longing in many Japanese hearts to just have the freedom to follow what you truly desire instead of being led by the expectations of others. And so I can sympathize with that a little bit, especially when the expectations that are created are just based on tradition. They have no objective value. I mean, there's probably some good things in the mix, but there's a lot of crap in the mix too, just man-made conventions and expectations that people are enslaved to culturally in Japan via the expectations of those around them and their own families and the places they work at. And so, my heart went out to the people of Japan as I saw certain elements in this movie and what things in life they were speaking to. But certainly the ending brought that out. So anyway, I want to talk about some of this in my review, so I'll probably try to think of ways that I can talk about some of the same stuff in a veiled way. So I apologize if some of this gets repeated in the review you may have already seen of me. But I think those are my main thoughts about the ending. There was, I did watch all the way through the credits. There's not a post-credit scene. But after the credits are done, they show, oh man, that last moment before the credits start, let me touch on that first, is, talking about how, man, I'm fighting a little bit, getting choked up talking about some of this stuff. As the character has won, he's defeated the virus, and man, I loved how the Gertrude, which is the slime, that's the oldest enemy in Dragon Quest. And so that slime has the most nostalgia attached to it. And the slime companion was like this sleeper agent. It was it was itself a defense program. In addition to playing the part of Gertrude in the story, it was a defense program put in there to fight off viruses. And so it gave the hero its power to fight off the virus, And that was such a great callback, so appropriate. The blue slime is the first enemy you encounter in the original Dragon Quest, when you leave the town. That's the first, maybe you'll run into a Drakey, but in all likelihood, the blue slime is the first enemy you're going to encounter. And so it was like, here I am at the end of this journey with you, the symbol of Dragon Quest, nostalgia. And just there to validate your love of Dragon Quest at the very end there and defeat the virus, defeat the naysayer, And so that was in its way a beautiful moment. But anyway, after that, the main character re-enters the simulation and he's kind of allowed to enjoy and embrace it again. And the characters like Bianca and the cat pet, whatever it was, Purcell, was his name maybe, they are kind of like having their happily ever after moment, and he said something about, there was something about being alone. He said something about like, man, I'm just didn't want to be alone or something like that. And they said, you don't ever have to be alone. We're here with you. You can continue to be with us. There was this idea, and I'm getting the dialogue wrong. But there was this idea of your loneliness being fulfilled by the characters that us here in the game. You know, you don't have to be lonely because we are here, these artificial characters, you know. And so again, that kind of brought out kind of the sadness for me in thinking about those in Japan, you know, who maybe feel like they can't really have good relationships, safe relationships, accepting, loving relationships, and that they can only find that unconditional acceptance in, you know, NPCs in video games, you know. And so anyway, but what I was going to say is there's a little post-credits, almost a slide. I'm not sure it had any motion involved. Might have just been a still image of that last scene, that last moment where you're where the main character is with the NPCs in the simulation, and they just put up some text that just says "Continue your adventure." ... You know, and I don't know if that necessarily meant, you know, see you at the next Dragon Quest game. Maybe it did, but maybe it was another way of saying, you know, continue your adventure in life. Maybe there was something they wanted you to take out of seeing this movie, having this catharsis, and taking that into your real life too. I don't know if it was what the intent was there, but anyway, yeah. So I mean, a movie that I really hated for the first 45 minutes at least. But when it got to the marriage parts, the relationship developing with Bianca there, it started to really kind of connect with me a little bit more. And then especially the ending, because of the themes that it was addressing and talking about, really I found moving. And the father-son stuff was, you know, good too. So anyway, yeah, that's all for now.